the wife of Hephaestus, which is Ptah, okay, the Greek name for Ptah. So we know that that relationship, and we know that Aglia's father was Zeus, but in the Ethiopian sources he's not called Zeus, he's called Tut, which identifies Zeus with Tut there as well. Okay, so which is an independent source again. So we're talking about another source. Before we talked about the Arabic Egyptian sources. We talked about that aren't, accessed. We talked about the Hellenic epic sources which aren't accessed, and there is also the Ethiopic sources which are not used as data. So when we start going into all these sources which are not being used or accessed, or made use of for our benefit, we will find a lot of important information to help us to piece together this history. Yeah. Another writer, Diogenes, a French writer, he says that the important point which I want to focus on here, he says that Telegonos, he identifies Telegonos with Nilos. Telegonos with Nilos. One of the things here that's important for us also to understand is that the kings had many names. This is what we saw at the beginning. They had many names. They had their throne name, an old throne name, a new throne name. They had their Horus name, their birth name. Their prenomen, which is the throne name, their nomen, which is the birth name, and they had different names. They might have even had Semitic names, which are not part of their tutelage, They might have had Ethiopian names as well. They ruled many areas, and so when they ruled another area, they might receive another name. Or perhaps, as the Hyksos, their origin might not necessarily be Egypt. They might not be originally Egyptians. And if that's the case, if they were born outside of Egypt, then they would have another name. So this is one of the issues, and then they get titles as well, or they get named after something for a particular reason. Like, so for example, this king, Telegonos, it says that he was king of Egypt, he was ruling Egypt, and he married Iho, or Isis, okay, and which identifies him with Osiris. Now, Telegonos is a Greek word which means far born. Okay? He was born far away. We know that it is said that Osiris was he grew up, didn't grow up in Egypt, So this is, I would argue, this is the reason why he's called here Telegonos, okay? But he's also called Nilos as Origen, he says, and we can justify this where he gets his data from. He's obviously got his data from Apollodorus in his Bibliotheca. Apollodorus is from the 2nd century. It's argued whether he's from 2nd century BC or 2nd century AD, but we won't get into that, Yeah, so, the argument is either real Apollodorus, the original Apollodorus, and that's the argument. So, anyway, so this is his text, very important text concerning Egypt. It is, I would say, the most important Greek text concerning Egypt, because it says everything plainly, and he's put together from those who came before him, and he's put it all together. So what he says is, sky, this is the translation here, sky, it means Oranos, or heaven, usually translated heaven. This is Oranos, like the planet Uranus, or the god Uranus. So Oranos was the first that ruled over the whole world. This is an important point here. Ruled over the whole world. Of course, we will say, you know, or scholars will say, the known world, you know, I mean, but what was the known world to them? We just surmise what we think the known world was, which we want to say the Mediterranean, but I argue it was a lot wider than that. In fact, we can evidence very clearly that it was a lot, you know, it was from all the way very north in Germany, all the way to China. You know, that was the known world. Was the known world? It was all the world. You know, that was the known world, and that can be evidenced. So anyway, he was a king of the whole earth. It doesn't say king of Egypt. It says king of the whole earth. That's important. You know, and then it says after him was Kronos. After Uranus was Kronos, then Zeus. And it says from Zeus he had a child named Epaphos, but Zeus's queen Hera wasn't happy that he had a child from another lady, understandably.
She had to get used to that.
Understandably. And so she besought the Curates to make away with this Epaphos, this child, and make away with him. They did, and when Zeus learned of it, he slew the Curates. But Iho set out in search of the child. She roamed all over Syria, because there it was revealed to her that the wife of the king of Babylos, which is it's Lebanon, you know, Phoenicia, the important city from there, Babylos. The wife of the king of Babylos was nursing her son, and having found Epaphos, she came to Egypt, and she was born in Argos. Her father was the king of Argos, so she was princess, you know. But she was also, it is said, she was a priestess in the temple of Hera, of Hera, the wife of Zeus. So she came to Egypt, and when she came to Egypt, then she married Telegonos, okay? Because Hera was after her, so she, you know, kept her distance a little, and she married Telegonos, who, and then it says who then reigned over the Egyptians. So he's the king of Egypt, this Telegonos, yeah, and was and set up an image of. She set up an image of Demeter, which is another, means divine mother. It's another name of herself, and who the Egyptians, they call this Demeter Isis. So what it says here in reality is that Iho is also called Demeter, divine mother, and she's also called Isis. Okay, and her son is Epaphos. So what we see is, and then we continue the last, sorry, and reigning over the Egyptians, Epaphos, so he succeeds, Epaphos succeeds in, and we're talking about the succession of kings here, okay? And so Epaphos married Memphis, or, you know, the Egyptian name for Memphis? Mennefer. Mennefer. So he married Memphis, the daughter of Nilos, and founded the city of Memphis after her. And he begot a daughter named Libya, from whom Libya, the country, is named. Libya married Poseidon, who in Latin is Neptune, and they had twins, Agnor and Belos. Agnor became the king of Phoenicia, Belos succeeded to become the king of Egypt. So we have a succession of kings. We have a succession of kings of Egypt again. So we have Uranus, Kronos, Zeus, Telegonos, Epaphos, Belos. And it continues, it mentions a couple other kings as well. So we've only made, just shortened the text here. Now, this is from a much earlier text, from the 6th century BC. That was Apollodorus from the 2nd century. This is, you know, centuries earlier. 8 centuries, if we say, is from the 2nd century AD. So this is before the time of Herodotus. He's called the first Greek historian. Okay? He's called the first, before the time of, he's in between, there is Homer, 8th century BC, then there is Hesiod, 7th century BC, then Aeschylus. After that, we have like Herodotus. So he writes a number of different texts, all relating to Egypt, pretty much. But it's Greek writing and it's Greek histories, you know, because the Greeks are intimately connected with the Egyptians, especially from this period. So called the suppliant maids. And in this text, he gives the same genealogy, you know. He says, they say that the land of Argos, in the land of Argos, Io was the ward of Hera, the wife of Zeus, Hera's temple, and Zeus approached her still, and there did Zeus engender issue. Epaphos was there engendered, so he was named. And who was born of Epaphos? Libya, who reaped lot of fruit, that she had many children, who were renowned, well known. And what other offspring? Belos. And with Belos had two sons, Danaos, and his brother was called Aegyptos, two twins. So we have a succession here of 1, 2, 3, 4 kings, and we omitted 3 from before. He mentions 2 of those 3. So this is from the earliest Greek histories we're talking about, and he's called the first of Greek historians.
Sorry, I'm
Please.
a bit lost. So when that man had a child with the other woman, that child had to flee, is that correct?
Yeah, the mother and child fled.
Mother and child fled.
Yeah, and then when he was
Because
born,
the
it says
queen-
they fled as
Because
well.
the other lady, because the wife was looking for them.
Yeah, yeah.
But then he went on to who had the twins, sorry, what were the
The
twins?
twins was pretty much at the last stage.
Right, okay.
So Belos had the twins. Belos is a title. It's not the actual name of a king. It means Lord. It's a Semitic word, and it just means Lord. Actually, it's the same as the word Baal. It means
So
Lord.
why was she bothered about this woman having a child? Was there a bit of power struggle or something?
Because Hera was
Because
like
she-
that, wasn't she?
she
Hera
was
was
the-
like that.
She was the main queen. She was the main queen, and so she you know, she wanted him to be monogamous.
Yeah,
Is
so
that
he
the
must
word?
have had-
Monogamous?
He must have had mistresses.
He did, he had
Okay.
plenty.
So why was the problem with this woman then, as opposed to the big?
Because this is early on, you know, this is early on. So this was the kind of the first incident, kind of pretty much.
She was trying to kill her.
So yeah, she tried to kill,
Yeah.
and she tried to kill the baby.
Wasn't Io was Hera's ward, so she
Yeah.
felt like, didn't she? She felt
Also-
betrayed
also,
because she
yeah.
was like her ward. She was supposed to she was
Yeah.
looking after her.
Also,
And she
Hera
betrayed
was
her.
already, she was already worshipped, and she already had temples according to the text. She was already worshipped, she already had temples. And this princess, Io, princess of Argos, who was never called princess, just called like, you know, so she was supposed to be a priestess worshipping in Hera's temple, so she was subordinate to her. So I guess there was several dimensions to her
Yeah.
anger. Yeah. So here we have the basic genealogy. I've omitted some kings, but starting with Zeus. So we had Zeus with Ego had Epaphos. Epaphos had was married to Memphis, which would be his stepsister, because her father was Nilos, and Nilos is another Greek name for Osiris. Yeah. So see, this is the problem as well with the scholars. They have to know that, you know, I mean, they know in many respects, but in many respects they don't know as well. Like one person had many names, and some of them they didn't understand. They didn't know that it was the same person. So they just treated them as separate personages because they didn't have any evidence to show them that they were the same person. So that's what we're trying to do here, to show that scholarship, to show that the evidence for these different names. So this is basically the lineage, and this is the lineage of, so Epaphras is identified with Pepi I. Zeus identified with Teti III, who, and Ihor identified with Iput, the wife of Teti, who was the father and mother of Pepi I. So what we see is Epaphras, once we take off the Hellenization, says Pef or Pep, it's Pepi, you know, and it has been Hellenized. And the Greeks made it because there's a word that is similar to Paphos, which is Ephipsos. In the Greek it looks the same. Sounds a little different, but when you look at them, the characters look the same. And so they say that Zeus touched Epaphos, or touched Ihor, and Epaphos was born, and that's why he's called Epaphos, because it means touched. So they Hellenize a Greek, an Egyptian name, and then later poets come along, because they're poets as well, they're elaborators, you know, and they come along and then, you know, elaborate that history of how Zeus touched him, and then you get other things like how Zeus gave birth to Athena, you know, through his head or whatever, you know, and so this is the poetical side of the things, which usually is, or many times is associated with their interpretation of the name. So, yeah. So this is from, this genealogy has come about from both Aeschylos from the 6th century BC and Apollodorus from later. Now, this is from a Greek text, a Greek writer. This from a Greek writer, 1995, on the heresy of Oedipus, and this is their genealogy. The one before was my genealogy, just to show that I'm not the only one who comes to this conclusion. So here we see, and this is a purely, this is a classical scholar, not an Egyptologist, a classical scholar, okay? So studies Greco-Roman history. So he says the origin of the Greek Thebes, not the Egyptian Thebes, the Greek Thebes. Zeus with Ihor became Egyptian, Ihor became the Egyptian goddess Isis. Memphis, who was the wife of Epaphras, and Epaphras founded Memphis, the city of Memphis. You know, it was the pyramid of Pepi I. His pyramid was called Memphis, Men-Nefer. But according to the Greek histories, they said that it was his wife, from his wife's name, that it was called, the city was called Memphis, where archaeology today, or the archaeology, or most scholars said it was from his pyramid that the city was named. But we have a number, Diodorus speaks on this subject as well. Diodorus says that it was from Osiris, his stepfather, who named Memphis. So, but the issue is her father actually. He said it was her father. So we have this, although there's a slight variation in it, yet we have either her father, or her husband named Memphis. I mean, you can't get better than that, you know, closer than that, you know, within the family. So one of them named Memphis, or was even named Memphis. So then we have Poseidon, who Herodotus says, when he looked into Poseidon, Herodotus says, I've looked into Egypt and I've asked all the priests and I've asked all the historians in ancient Egypt, 5th century BC, and he says, it seems to me that Poseidon wasn't known in Egypt, he said, only in Libya, he said, but I can do, we can do one better than on him. Anyway, Poseidon married Libya, who founded the country of Libya, which was also called Africa. It had different names. So, and then Belos, which is, as we said, it's a title meaning Lord. It is a Semitic word, and we also have to say, you know, I mean, why was he? Why it's a Greek history. It's an Egyptian king, but he has a Semitic title. You see, so this is to do with their rule and leadership and dominion, and they record different things in different places. So this is also certainly from a Semitic title that he had, and then and so basically that just evidences that this is the common understanding of these histories, even though it's not widely known or propounded, and even among the Greek scholars, classical scholars, there are two groups of classical scholars. Those who say Zeus is from Mount Olympus, he's Greek, you know, he's not Egyptian, he's only Greek. But the majority of the scholarship in classical studies, if you look at it properly, the majority says he's Egyptian.